Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Epic Illustrated number 34, the February 1986 issue, which is the last issue of Epic Illustrated magazine of all time. This was, I was buying these off the stands, as I've told you before. This was a very sad day in my life. It was a cold, cold winter that year with Epic ending. We've been looking at every single issue since the channel started 3 or 4 months ago, and we're finally here. And it's been quite a journey, and we've seen a lot of good stuff. We've seen some stuff that wasn't so good. But I still overall like Epic Illustrated. There's still enough great stuff in it that I'm going to miss it. And it's been really fun rereading these. We've started off with a bang. Beautiful Arthur Suydam cover illustrating the return of Charlie and Flytrap, which is within. So let's take a look at this. I've got my hankies ready. It's going to be a bittersweet affair. In the overview section, Archie Goodwin just kind of thanks everyone, bids us farewell. He does do a bit of errata. I guess the last issue, number 33, that chapter of the Last Galactus story was actually inked by Bob Wyacek, not by Terry Austin. I don't know if you care, but just for sticklers out there. Where the next issue section would be, or whatever this is called, it says, it's not over yet. There's going to be an epic special this spring with the conclusion of the Last Galactus story. Pretty sure that never happened. In fact, I'm almost positive. Because I was, reading lots of comics then. Yeah, that never came out. I'm pretty sure John Byrne, pretty soon after this, left for DC to take over Superman. So, it's a damn shame, but there'll be no conclusion. Oh man, what a way to start off an issue. So Archie Goodwin got Paolo Serpieri, the great Italian cartoonist. You may know him from Heavy Metal Magazine, his Druna comics, those very saucy, raunchy, sci-fi sex comics, beautifully drawn. I was a fan of Druna, when they were coming out, not for the artistic merit, for the ways I could use those pages, if you will. But, I realized at the time that he's an amazing artist. Serpieri really is good at what he does. And look at this. That face. I mean, this guy's a master cartoonist. And this story's called The Beast. It's kind of in a Western setting. We see these two treasure hunters. And one of them is just a stone cold bastard. And the other one's kind of just, whatever, going along for the ride. But there's a rumor or legend that there's this cave and it's protected by this beast, and there's tons of gold there and treasure, Indian treasure, but no one's ever come back from searching for it, so it reinforces the legend. So a lot of people stay away, but these guys are just like, fuck it, we want that gold. I love how this is colored, very like sepia toned, because it takes place in the desert in the American Southwest. So it really looks like, the sun bleached coloring of the desert. So they get to this, it's kind of like a cave, but it's kind of also like a temple. And the other guy finds all these dead bodies. Looks like they've just been devoured, spit up. And then all of a sudden this old Indian shows up and he kind of warns them off. He's like, yeah, the beast killed these guys and they'll kill you too if you keep trying looking for this gold. The hard-ass guy basically just says, yeah, whatever, old man. I'm getting that gold. The other guy's kind of like, I can't go in there. He's chickening out. So he says, fine, fuck you. Goes in there. And after a minute or two, he's like, he can hear his voice inside the temple cave saying, I found it. There's gold. There's gold. So this guy who was scared to go in is all like, hey, wait up. Half of that's mine. And he goes in the cave. And you can hear from their word balloons that they start fighting over the gold instantly. And the Indian thinks to himself, the beast. And it looks like these two gold digger guys or treasure hunters, they actually turn into beasts and just rip each other to shreds. And the Indian sees their blood pooling out from the cave, and he says, and so it goes. The men come as they always do, and they are always too blind to see the hope in their hearts turns to desire, which in turn becomes greed. When greed overcomes all, that is when man will turn on man. And the only one to truly triumph is the beast. And then we see that the Indian has this scary looking rat tail. Kind of has a mixed message, though. It almost seems like without this, whatever twist, that it would be some metaphor or message story. Like, yeah, there's no beast, there's no monster in there. It's just men turn to beasts whenever, there's greed involved. But then apparently he is really a beast too. A literal beast, so I don't know. But oh man, this art is just flawlessly beautiful. And the hits keep coming. Love Doesn't Last Forever, written by Alan Moore, drawn by Rick Veitch. This is the first time these guys collaborated. They became long-term collaborators on so many different projects. 1963, Supreme, America's Best Comics. Just so much stuff these guys did together over the years, but this is the first time. And this is a great little sci-fi story. And we see in this apartment, there's this person, and they're thinking to themselves about, I guess this person is dating this guy named Bruno. And Bruno's kind of a scumbag, it sounds like. But they really love him. But they're talking to themselves, basically, thinking to themselves that if he doesn't come tonight, if he blows me off again, he treats me like shit in public when other people are around. He leaves me waiting all the time. If he does that again, I'm taking the first rocket ship to Titan. I like this little touch. I remember as a kid thinking this is kind of cool. Alan Moore thinks of what will the music formats be in the future. And it's this like David Bowie music cube they put in the, whatever it is, the turntable, or whatever they call it. They call them dice. So it's an old Bowie dice. And we see Bruno. It looks suspiciously like John Waters. This is very odd. So now we see earlier. And we see Bruno go into this little shop. And we notice that Bruno has a rash on his hand. When you first read it, I didn't even notice this. But it'll be relevant later. So the worker at the store is this very effeminate man. Wears lipstick and earrings. And these two customers, these kind of old ladies, they see Bruno and they're like, oh, Bruno, what are you up to? Whose wife are you going to fuck tonight? And he's like, oh, ladies, I don't kiss and tell, They just think he's charming. He's a total Lothario guy. And he teases the shop worker. Totally is making fun of him and picking on him. And the shop assistant is very embarrassed. And he's like, please, Mr. Morse, please leave me alone. And he goes off to a little rendezvous, one of his lady friends. And when he gets inside, her name's Shalane. That's an odd name. And Shirlene's dead on the floor, blood coming out of her. And Bruno's just like, fuck. And speaking of which, look at this. This is an actual photo reference of John Waters. I've seen John Waters do that in photos, the French inhale. And so it's kind of, I love that, for just picturing John Waters as this like sleazy playboy. It's just very funny to me. So all of a sudden, he hears "Put him up, Bruno," nice and slow. And there's a gun pointed at his head. And it's Shirlene's husband, Milburn. And he sits him down and basically says, listen, I know you've been fucking my wife. I fuck around too. I don't really care. I need to know, have you been with any women? And I keep wanting to call him John Waters now. Bruno's just all like, no, it's not like what you think, blah, blah, blah. And he slaps this truth patch on him. I guess in this future, they've got this thing that if you put this patch on someone's head, you can tell if they're lying. It'll turn a certain color. So he says, give me the honest truth. Have you been screwing any other woman in the past 2 months? And Bruno says, no, I ain't, but then Milburn cuts him off and he says, Red, you're telling the truth. The patch, says that you're telling the truth. And he explains to Bruno what's going on. He says, I fool around and I recently got with an alien. And I guess that's pretty gnarly in this future, like having sex with an alien. Because even Bruno's just kind of like, geez, Wilbur. And I guess after having sex with her a few times, this Denebian, he got a rash on his hand. And pretty soon it spread. And he pulls back his robe and shows him how bad it's gotten. And look at this. This is insane. I can't even almost tell what I'm looking at, but it just looks like a horrible mutation. Rick Wright using some photo even. This looks very John Totalbin to me too. I wonder if he assisted him. Because those guys were pals, always helping each other out on deadlines and stuff. So Milburn says we can't let this spread. And we're going to have to be taken out, both you and me. We can't have this shit spread. And he blows Bruno away. And then turns the gun on himself. And blows his own head off. And now we cut away and we see that Bruno's lover from that first page. And they're heading for Titan. Bruno never showed up. And when we finally see them in the light, it's that shopkeeper, the shop assistant. So all these months, Bruno's been fucking them. And so that's why the truth patch said he was telling the truth. Because he asked him, have you been fucking any women? And Bruno said, no. Because he's been fucking this guy. And all the time, though, whenever they're in public, he teases him, acts like he doesn't know him. Because he's homophobic, Wants to play the tough guy act. And as Bruno's lover gets on the spaceship to Titan, we see that they've already got the rash on the back of their hand. And it's going to spread. A bubble of silence presses against my eardrums. One by one, the engines begin to scream. Just really good Alan Moore stuff. This is like, he was drawing Swamp Thing at this time. Just almost about to come out with Watchmen. And beautiful Rick Wright chart. I mean, this is a fucking treasure. I don't know if this has ever been reprinted anywhere. So for that reason alone, you got to own this issue. This is kind of annoying. The very last issue, they probably got so much shit to squeeze in. And they show off the comics work of these 3 contestants who joined the Atlanta Fantasy Fair contest. Comic contest. These are people I've never seen again. This first one, Fortresses, story by Chessia Mann, art by Michael White. The story isn't really a story, it's just a bit of, it's poetry, kind of sophomoric poetry. Not the worst art I've ever seen, but not very good. I can imagine, though, with this imagination of this artist. Maybe Michael White got really good. He could have. I could see that after years and years of drawing. But whatever. Putting this side by side with Alan Moore and all these great artists. A little one-page gag strip from Cheryl Manaus. It's called Sarvel. I don't think she ever did comics again. And this one is just ugly to me. Like, obviously this person is skillful, has some kind of talent. But basically it's just like of copying photos. But not even putting them, like positioning them in the panel well. This just looks gross to me. It's called Felina and it's by E.H. Terrell. And this is pretty much like a poem too, just like whatever. Ugh. Barry Windsor Smith, works in progress. So apparently, Barry Windsor Smith was working on all these things that he was going to put in Epic Illustrated. But now that Epic Illustrated's done, they're in limbo. Some of them he's almost done with. This was a cover he was working on. This was going to be a cover of Epic, but too late. They ran out of time. And this first black and white panel is from a kind of like a 50-page graphic novel he was working on called Scepter's Web. And then this panel and all the other panels from this are from a story called Revenge. And it looks really good. Basically, it's completely written and penciled at this point, partially inked and colored. So it sounds like a couple weeks he could have polished this off, this 15-page story. It was going to be, he wrote it for Epic Illustrated. He started in 1977 and just was slowly working on it all these years in between his painting work. So I can't believe I've never seen this anywhere. I'm pretty sure this has never been printed. I've never heard of it. And it looks really nice. Here's just a penciled and inked page from that Revenge story. Really good stuff. Crazy that there's these almost finished Barry Windsor Smith comics out there. And who knows if we'll ever see them. Here we have another collaboration between Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson. Al Williamson doing some beautiful art the way he always does. Al Williamson really never changed his style. Yeah, always kind of drew the same way for 40 years, 50 years, well, 40 years. And this story's called Out of Phase. And it's about this guy figured out how to transition between realities. And he's just constantly these awesome, like, pulp SF, high adventure, sci-fi scenarios. And then he phases out to another reality. But they always kind of involve, like, him being the hero, fighting off these evil aliens, and getting the girl. And there's all these beautiful women, too, just like in a pulp. And then right when he's done fighting the monster and, oh, this is great, now I can enjoy my time here, he always phases out. So we find out how this started. He was just a normal guy, just like you and me, stuck in our, concrete reality. But he always felt like there was something more out there, so he started studying arcane literature and figured out how to phase in between dimensions. And basically that's all he does. Like, why stay in crappy reality when, you can just phase through all these amazing Flash Gordon type scenarios. But his phasing's getting out of hand. He finds that it's harder and harder for him to stay in one reality. So it's just very, it's not fun anymore. It's getting a little annoying. So he's in this one reality that looks kind of post-apocalyptic. It's not a happy, fun one. And these two, stormtrooper type guys, they approach him and they tackle him. And they're saying, "You're a sick man. We're only trying to help." And then we realize they turn into these two attendants from the mental institution who are carting Strode away in a straitjacket. And they're like, come on, You got to get back to the hospital. So then we see him in the hospital, and he fades away into another reality. So I kind of like this double twist ending, because we see here it's like, oh, it's all in his head. He's crazy. But then we realize, no, it's not all in his head. Reality is a strange and curious thing. Most see it as something singular and solitary. I know it is infinite. So here we got another Dr. Watchstop story, wasting time. Just like all the Dr. Watchstops, beautifully painted, humorous, scientific-based jokes, kind of little gags. And once again, that's what we get here. But man, I love his painting. He's a really good painter. Here we have The Last Galactus Story, Chapter 9. God damn it. This thing is fucking endless. Well, it does end prematurely, because we never get to see what happens, which I don't know if that's a bad thing. So, yeah. John Byrne, Terry Austin. Galactus is checking out that huge ship. It's the size of like a galaxy. I'm really tired and I'm yawning now, but it's perfect timing because this makes me just yawn. Oh, and look at this, the last page. Hey, it's the Watcher. Wow. That's great. And so I guess we'll never see what happened. And it's a shame. It's a damn shame. Here we have a little short sci-fi story from Joe Duffy, the managing editor. And it's drawn, the artwork is by T. Sagara and Hero Media Associates. I guess I could have looked them up, but I'm lazy. But it's definitely seems to be Japanese artists. Really nice stuff. I mean, look at this. Great sci-fi art. It's really nice. Some of these are a little too tiny. I wish they were not that small. You can barely see them. But this story is it's not very good. Joe Duffy's not that good a writer. So I'm not going to bore you with the details. And it's not a comic, so. But you can see a little more of this art. Pretty nice stuff. So this is interesting. There's 2 stories in this issue that have a whole backstory. So apparently Alan Milgram, the editor, artist, writer, Marvel Comics for 40 years. Back in 1978, he was inspired by independently published comics like Big Apple Comics and Star Reach, and he wanted to do one himself. So he got a bunch of contributors. He got Jim Starlin, Bernie Wrightson, P. Craig Russell, and Walter Simonson. And the jobs came in slowly, but Alan Milgram just never had time to put it out. He was so busy being a Marvel editor and inker. So just years go on. P. Craig Russell took his story back, and he put it in Night Music, which we looked at, 30 episodes ago. And Walter Simonson never finished his. But Bernie Wrightson's and Jim Starlin's were finished, and they were just sitting in Alan Moore's desk for, 8 years? Until now. So when Alan Milgram found out Epic was ending, he said, hey, do you want to publish these? And Archie Goodwin was like, yes, I would. So this first page here, this was going to be the cover of this comic. And really nice Bernie Wrightson. Pretty weird, these colorings here. Usually Bernie Wrightson, especially in the 70s, would draw really nice backgrounds. But maybe he wasn't getting paid a lot for this. It's kind of working on spec, so he didn't want to put too much work into it. Here we see the Bernie Wrightson story that was slated for that issue. And I gotta say, this is you couldn't pay enough in 1986 to get Bernie Wrightson to draw this well, because Bernie Wrightson wasn't as good as an artist as he was in the 70s. This is the high point of Wrightson's career, the mid to late 70s. He was getting better and better as an illustrator. I mean, he already was, but he was getting outstandingly good. But he still had his expressive style that was distinctly his own. By the 80s, mid 80s, his art was definitely well drawn art, very skillful, but just kind of perfunctory, Like, the characters were very well drawn, but there was no life to them as much as there was in the 70s stuff. He had this very Frazetta-like feeling of just the way someone's standing in a certain way or holding an object, or even just some background stuff, the way a tree is drawn. Very distinctive and nice. And he lost that over the decades and over the years. So in this story, we see it's like very post-apocalyptic, and we see this seemingly maybe the last man on Earth. He's got this big rifle, and he's yelling. He's saying, you know, come on out, you damn bug-faced hunk of tin. So he's yelling at some robot, and we see the robot come out. That is a cool-looking robot. And just see what I'm talking about here? Look at his, like, expressive body language here. Rearing back from the surprise of seeing the robot. This story's called They Just Fade Away. And by the way, Bernie Wrightson writes and draws it. So they start fighting. And it seems like they've been fighting for a long time. This is just a daily thing with them. They play cat and mouse and try to kill each other. The man gets a pretty good shot at the robot. Really kind of takes him down a peg. So the robot, and the guy just breaks down. And he's just pleading with the robot, basically. It's like, don't you understand the enemy's gone? We're in the same army. We're both in the American Army, United States military. And there's no reason why we should keep fighting. The war's over. There's nobody left but us. There's nothing to fight for. This is crazy. And he's so like, pissed off. He doesn't even notice that the robot is fixing himself. The robot has all these appendages, all these little tools, and he's fixing his arm so he can continue fighting. This guy just keeps ranting at him. As soon as the robot's obviously not listening, as soon as he fixes himself, he blows the guy away. We see his guts spilling out here. But then this is weird. So the robot goes up to him, and all of his appendages come out. And then he fixes the man. He's like also a medical droid. And he pumps him full of tons of Valium. And he fixes all his wounds. And then takes off. And then a little later on, the guy wakes up. And he's thinking the same thought balloon that he thought in the first panel. There's his mark. But when did he pass? Today? Yesterday? So it's such a weird idea that apparently this has happened over and over. This robot keeps killing the man, fixing him, wiping his memory, and they continue this stupid game of combat. Pretty neat, kind of weird story. Oh, man, look at this. The Adventures of Charlie and Flytrap. Written and illustrated by Arthur Suydam. It says the story concepts by Peter Koch here. It's weird because it's really not much of a story. So Charlie and Flytrap are trudging through the wasteland, and they come upon Charlie's favorite restaurant. And the guys who work in the restaurant are not happy. They're just like, oh, please, Mr. Charlie, please don't blow this, shoot the place up like you did last time. And he's just like, don't worry, I just want some food. And they're all just like, oh, shit. What is he going to do this time? It's beautiful Arthur Suydam art. God, I love looking at this guy's stuff. His colors, his crazy imaginative figures. All these workers are like slug beings. So they bring out their food, and Charlie notices there's a cockroach in his chop suey. And he's furious, and he says, come here. What's the big idea? And the waiter isn't even concerned. In fact, he laughs at him. And he says, you just eat it. It's fine. And he's like, I'm not going to pay for this shit with, bugging my food. This is a very underground lettering. It could be like Von Baudet. And they just take off. They're like, fuck you guys. I'm not paying for that shit. So the restaurant workers are very mad. And they have this like kind of underground crypt. And They open the trap door, and they've got this giant guard dog, mutated bulldog looking thing. And he doesn't even go for Charlie. He just jumps on all the restaurant workers and starts chowing down on them. And the waiter's all like, "What are you doing? You're supposed to get that other guy. Crazy dog." So Charlie looks back and he sees it's a fracas, and he can't help but join in. He pulls out his gun and starts shooting at the dog, but I guess his aim's a little rusty, and most of his shots kill the customers. And meanwhile, the dog is chowing down on the customers, so it's just a massacre. It's just chaos. I just love that panel right there. That's pretty cool looking. So the dog finally notices Charlie because he's shooting at him, and he starts running towards him. And Charlie's like, "Die, die, die." He's pumping bullets into him. And the dog keeps on coming. And just as Charlie, his gun empties, the dog gives up the ghost just to the nick of time. And the waiter guy is just like, "The customers are dead, cook dead, dog dead." It's like, "I'm going to kill you, you troublemaker." And he picks up a cleaver and starts chasing Charlie. And that's how it ends. It's almost like some funny animal comic. This is just total zany antics, this one. Very silly. But it's Charlie and Flytrap. I wish there was more of that stuff. Amber One. This is by Jim Starlin. This is from that Alan Milgram comic we were talking about earlier. So this is from, like, Jim Starlin drew this in 1977. This is not very good. It's just kind of pretentious. Jim Starlin trying to, I don't know, it's kind of a poem. We see this woman's thoughts. This naked lady. There's some weird Ditko touch there. It's like the shit in Dr. Dormammu's dimension. Really well drawn for Jim Starlin. I mean, there's some really nice faces in here. He definitely put more work into this than his average Marvel comic. But it's just, yeah, it's not very good. You know, whatever. And I guess at the end, she ends up with death. And she's like, "This is where I belong." This is interesting. Sandy Plunkett. Sandy Plunkett's such a weird artist in comics history. Almost everything they did was for Marvel, but so little. Like, I'm talking about 3 decades. They probably had 25 pages published or less. But every little thing they drew was really nice. Just a really clean, good style. I mean, look at this. It reminds me a lot of Paul Kirshner, but a little more dramatic. And but it's just got that super crisp, clean style like Paul Kirshner has. This is written by Roy Thomas. This is just a vignette about the last, day of Robert E. Howard's life. And Robert E. Howard's mom was real sick for a while. And he was a real mama's boy, Robert E. Howard. His father is disconsolate. He's just like, basically, they're not even pretending that, she's going to pull through. The nurse confirms it. The nurse says, "Yeah, she's not long for this world. She's definitely a goner." And Robert, just bereft, goes out to his car and gets the gun out of the glove compartment. And as he raises it towards his head, we see all of his characters brought to life by Sandy Plunkett. I don't know this character. I don't know if that's Brand McMorn or I don't know. He's got another name. But these are all his characters he created for the pulps. And we see the full page thing, and then we see the panel, like in pencil, shaded pencil, of Robert E. Howard slowly lifting the gun closer to his temple. Looks like Solomon Kane here. Beautiful drawing. Sandy Plunkett was a lot better in the 70s. He definitely seemed like he was like wanting to be like P. Craig Russell, Mike Kaluta, have that beautiful kind of Art Nouveau style. It seems like in the 80s he got more just perfunctory, just like, I'm just going to draw solid. But it's really good, solid artwork. Conan, gun's getting closer. King Cole. And then right as he blows his brains out, all of his characters are running through his head. It's kind of weird, you know, they say when you die that your life flashes before you. But the imaginary life of the mind that Robert E. Howard had was stronger than reality to him. So when he dies, this is what he sees. He doesn't see his own life. He sees all the creations he made and all the stories he told. I think that's Almeric, which brings Epic around to a nice little circle. We see the funeral notice for Robert E. Howard and his mother. And it's pretty nice. Odd little story, just honoring Robert E. Howard. Oh man, another great one. So this is Slow Dancer, or Movements Calculated to Drive You Lonely or Worse. And it's written and drawn by Bill Sienkiewicz. You could probably already tell just by looking at this. But writing it, this is the first time I believe Bill Sienkiewicz ever wrote a comic story. This is years before Straight Toasters. The art still has some of that Neil Adams influence that he had in most of the Moon Knight issues that he drew. But it's definitely also has a lot of the style that, you know, from New Mutants on, doing more abstract, interesting things. So this is some nice stuff. It's a really good story too, better than most Epic stories. And it takes place in this like kind of fascist 1984 type world where people aren't allowed to have human contact. Apparently, there's some disease in the world. So we see this guy, our hero, and excuse me a second. Just need some water. And he's got this like government appointed psychiatrist because he has, you know, tendencies that aren't doctrinaire or kosher to the government. And he's basically trying to convince him that he's got to stop this dangerous behavior he's been doing. And what behavior is that? This guy goes to these illegal dance parlors and just like kind of ballroom dances, slow dances with people, with partners. And nothing raunchy or anything. But this world where nobody can touch each other, just getting to touch like your partner's hand while you dance is exhilarating and thrilling. So even though he could be arrested or maybe even killed for this transgression against the law, he keeps doing it. And his therapist has to, you know, keep trying to convince him not to. That's a great panel right there. But you see, this is what I mean about Bill Sienkiewicz not quite being there. You know, this face right here, it looks like he gained 100 pounds in this panel. Like, it's so wide. So it's definitely leaning towards Electroassassin, which I guess comes out in 2 years from now. But he's still got some of his old, you know, Neil Adams stuff. Some of the guys from the government show up to the psychiatrist. I love with this, the way they have this fashion, this like hood, but they look kind of like businessmen. And they kind of tell the guy that it turns out the big conspiracy is that the machines that are needed by these guys to keep power, they've been giving humans disease somehow. But they made up the story about human touch. So they have to keep this going, enforcing this stupid law. All the while they know that it's their precious machines that are doing it. And they basically tell the psychiatrist, like, you got to take care of this guy. He's a rebel. So that night, he decides to go dancing again, our hero. It's like, fuck it, let's dance. And he goes to one of those parlors. Look at that, how Sienkiewicz that is. I don't get this. They wear these skull caps that are, like, wired up to things. I don't know if that increases the dancing pleasure, what it's for. But, you know, he loves it. It's a wonderful time. The next day, he's back in his therapist's office. And he's really laying down the law. He's like, you must stop this moral atrocity, this dancing. He says, you know, when I was your age, I used to dance too. But they did things to my mind And but every now and then I get memories, especially when I watch films of these people dancing, these outlaws. Kind of admits to our hero that he's been watching his videos. They've been taping all of these illegal dance parlors. And this just sets him off. He grabs his pipe, breaks through the window that separates them, and drops the pipe so he can beat the shit out of him mano a mano with his own hands. He says, then I touched him hard, fortissimo. A 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 times again and again and again. Con brio, vivace, until the son of a bitch stopped breathing. So we jump forward in time. There was an inquisition. All the other slow dancers were killed. They burned down the dance parlor. And he was kept alive as an example. They let him live. You dance alone now, they told me. You dance alone. Coda. And they chopped off his hands and put hooks in so he can never touch again. Pretty good story for epic, you know? This is like Bill Sienkiewicz never wrote before, and he turns in a story that's better than, I don't know, 80% of the stories we've read in epic. Because there's a lot of silly stories in these magazines. But there you have it. Oh, man. I had my hankies ready, but I'm doing okay. I haven't started crying. But this is the end of Epic Illustrated, number 34. Probably the best issue Epic ever had. This is a really good issue for Epic. There's some turds in here, like always. But man, the good stuff is excellent. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you enjoyed these Epic Illustrateds in total. I mean, I've been doing them ever since the channel started about 3 or 4 months ago, every 5 episodes. But I'm going to do probably the same way I'm going to do another anthology. I don't know which one yet, but I have a lot of great anthologies I want to show off. And I'm probably, in 5 episodes, you're going to see the first issue of that anthology. And I better get cracking, start looking through my anthologies, and see which one I'm going to do next. But yeah, like I said, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.